What you know, Alibis. Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. It's Wednesday, May 14th. We did not have court yesterday in the Karen Reed trial. Somebody was sick. It was never confirmed who, so I'm not going to speculate, but we were back today. However, the first part of the day was not televised because it was John O'Keefe's niece. And due to the fact that she is a minor, there was no live streaming of her face or her testimony allowed. However, a journalist named Christina Rex was in the courtroom and published notes of what was being said. I will link the article in the description below so you guys can go check it out. She said the relationship with her and Karen was dependent on the day. Some days were good, some were not. She felt that Karen favored her brother more and the two of them were close. She said it wasn't that Karen would ignore her, but there was a certain coldness there. As far as Karen and John's relationship, in the beginning, it was very lighthearted, but by the end of 2021 into the beginning of 2022, things changed. They were fighting a lot in person at John's house or over the phone. She said Karen would be louder than John and would be angry and upset. She talks about that New Year's vacation where Karen said John was all over somebody that they knew. His niece said that Karen and John argued in the kids' hotel room. At one point, John checked in on them and told his nephew to get off of his iPad. And then Karen started yelling about John kissing someone else, and she had seen it. She said Karen was loud and very upset. After that New Year's trip, the relationship changed. She recalled an argument in the kitchen, and his niece was in the next room. John told Karen their relationship was good, but it seems maybe it had run its course. John asked Karen to leave, but she wouldn't. When John saw his niece had seen and or heard that argument, he got more angry and more aggressively asked Karen to leave, and then he went upstairs. Karen followed him and was banging on the door. In the following days and weeks, his niece said John and Karen were cold towards one another, and there was tension and arguing a couple of times a week. One time, John left the house to go on a drive, and Karen called him saying that his niece and nephew were worried and that he should come home. But John's niece said they actually weren't worried. Moving on to when John died. She said the rule in the house was she had to charge her phone in John's bedroom at night. She had a friend over that evening, and after the friend left, she went and put her phone on charge in John's room and went to bed. Karen came into her room about 4:30 that morning. She was frantic and was shaking his niece, saying that John had not come home. She had never seen Karen like this. Karen asked the niece to call John from her own phone, which she did, and got no answer. Karen then was asking for numbers that she didn't have, including Jennifer McCabe. She heard Karen on the phone, but wasn't sure with whom. She was saying things like, what could have happened? Could I have done something? Could he have been hit by a plow? Maybe I hit him. When Jen, Carrie, and Karen came back to John's, Jen McCabe checked on her, and she said Jen was level-headed. Karen did not interact with her, and by this point, his niece said she was starting to get nervous. Later that morning, Karen returned back to John's with her dad and her brother after being at the hospital. Karen told John's niece and her grandfather that she felt like she was living in a nightmare. On cross, it was Yannetti. When Karen spent all this time with you, you didn't call her the defendant, right? No, she called her Karen. The defense pointed out things Karen would do with her, like get their hair and nails done. She would come to sporting events with John. She would straighten his niece's hair once a week, plan birthday parties, and also a scavenger hunt in 2020. Back to that New Year's trip in Aruba, the defense asked if Karen took her to dinner and for ice cream, but she didn't remember. She was asked if John fell asleep before midnight, and she said that she doesn't remember. She was in a crisis because she had just been dumped by her 8th grade boyfriend. Christina Rex, who was given the notes for this, said that there was some laughter in the courtroom when this was said. After that trip, Karen was still spending time at John's, but it wasn't the same as before. Back to being live where we could watch. They show a clip of Karen from Dateline on October 18th, 2024. She says it wasn't a last date in a bad relationship. That wasn't going on. John made it clear to me, I'm never breaking up with you. Not never that we were in this good or bad, but you're the best person I've ever been with kind of way. The second clip was from the documentary Body in the Snow. It shows Karen say she didn't think John knew about her and Brian Higgins texting. She said she didn't feel like John would have lost it and caused a fight over that. And she didn't feel John's emotions with her got really strong. The next witness, Zachary Clark, he is a sergeant with the Massachusetts State Police. They wanted to look for DNA and trace evidence on Karen's SUV. He took photos of the car and he chose white fingerprint powder to dust for fingerprints on the outside and the inside of that right front passenger seat. There were no usable impressions found. He was asked to go to 34 Fairview to take overall photos of the scene. He also documented brake and acceleration tests from a reconstruction trooper, and he was asked to take videos of the backup and acceleration process, as well as the vehicle's backup warning system as they did some tests. They show photos of the odometer reading as well as how her backup camera would look from the inside of the car. On cross, February 1st, 2022, that was the start of the witness's involvement. He was with the crime scene unit in Maynard. A year later, he joined Norfolk Detectives Unit, and Tully was the supervisor. The witness is still with that department, and he's asked if he was there when Tully was removed. There was an objection that was sustained. They went to a sidebar. The witness knew John was found on Brian Albert's front lawn, but did not know that Brian's brother was a Canton police detective. When he got to the Canton Police Department, Proctor was inside the Sally Port. He doesn't know how long Proctor had been there or if he had been monitored. July 18th of 2023, he participated in an interview of Colin Albert, who is the nephew of Brian Albert. He and Trooper Proctor interviewed him. The defense points out the event was January 29th, 2022, and that interview with Colin was a year and a half later. And Proctor did not run that report by the witness, and the witness did not read it for accuracy before it was published. He was not asked to go to 34 Fairview on the days Proctor and Buchanan found those taillight pieces. Did anyone ask you to photograph evidence supposedly found 3 weeks later? The witness said the only time he was called out to 34 Fairview was February 1st. The next witness, Evan Brent, he's with the Massachusetts State Police. He responded to 34 Fairview February 3rd around 9:45 in the morning. Troopers Tully, Buchanan, Proctor, DeChico, and Moore were there. The witness photographed them digging through snowbanks with shovels. Some items that they found were on top of the snow from the snow melt, and he also noted it was raining that day. Other items that were found were under a foot to a foot and a half of snow. He also went to John's residence to document John's Chevy Traverse, and he documented that surveillance camera at John's house. They bring in 7 photos of John's car. He personally did not observe any damage on that car. On cross, he said he doesn't know who had access to the car in those 5 days, and he doesn't know how any of the items at 34 Fairview got there or if anybody had access to the lawn before he came. He isn't aware whether or not there was a guard posted there. There was no crime scene tape, and there was no tent put up. The witness did not write a report overall. He wrote a report on what he did personally, on what he saw and photographed. Proctor was the one that wrote the overall report. The next witness is Brian Gallerani. He is a sergeant with the Needham Police Department. On January 16th, 2024, he collected buccal swabs from Trooper Proctor and Buchanan at the Canton Police Department. Those were sent to a lab in Virginia. And on cross, he was not asked to do swabs for Kevin Albert or Trooper Tully. The next witness, Maureen Hartnett, she is with the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab. On February 1st, 2022, she was dispatched to the Canton Police Department to the Sally Port. Troopers Proctor, Dunn, and Clark were there, and Trooper Gallagher from the Canton PD was there. She said someone was there taking photographs, and she said she may ask them to take specific photos for her, and they show a photo of the back of the car. She noted damage to the right rear taillight area. She did swabs for blood on the undercarriage of the car, and that was negative. On the back bumper, she saw scratches and apparent pieces of glass. She marked those and collected them using tweezers. They show a close-up of this glass on the bumper and then close-ups of the scratches on the rear of the car. They also show a photograph of a hair on the taillight area as well as a dent. She wanted to collect the entire taillight housing to compare to the taillight pieces. She's asked if when a bag is opened by someone examining it, is there small loose pieces or is it bagged separately? The witness said she would separate small pieces into smaller packages and then put it back into the larger package so that doesn't get lost. And that was done in this case. She put 2 smaller packages in the larger bag. They bring in the packaging to show the jury, and she shows the jury also where she took the swabs from on the taillight casings and the housing. She also took a sample of the blood in the solo cups. She allowed the stains to thaw, and then she did her collection. For the clothing and the gray sweatshirt, she put markings by the areas of damage. On the front, obviously, that had been cut off of him with that straight line down the middle. She also looked at the front and the sleeve area. They show the stains that she tested on the shirt, and they were positive as blood. For the jeans, she saw dirt and debris, looked to be mainly on the backside of these, and she saw numerous red and brown stains. On the items that she marked as areas of interest, they were positive for blood. She also collected debris from the sweatshirt, but she did not see anything of note on those scrapings. For the jeans, those go to the trace unit. She does not personally test those. On cross, she can't say when the dent and the scratches were put on the car, and she did not make any conclusions as far as this being a car versus pedestrian incident. She acknowledges the dent and the scratches could have existed before January 29th of 2022. She looked for biological material on the car, such as blood or tissue, and didn't see any. She was told John had injuries on his arms, but she did not see the photo back then. She has seen that photo since. They show the photo to the witness, and she says, as far as anything on the vehicle causing those, that is not an analysis she would perform. As far as the upper liftgate area and the undercarriage, she found nothing notable when she did her overall look of the SUV, and she was never asked to examine those areas. She didn't collect anything from those areas, but she did do some testing, some screenings on the lower lying areas like the tire flats, the lower edge of the bumper, as well as the tailpipe. That was all negative for blood. She had never taken swabs from red solo cups. She chose a cup at random and did 2 swabs from the same cup. She left the rest of the evidence with brown stains at the Canton Police Department, but ultimately the swabs from the solo cups were not tested. The defense asked where those swabs came from, and she was told they came from a single stain area from under the victim. She was told that by an officer on scene at the Sallyport, but she doesn't know who the officer was, and she was not shown any notes or a chain of custody. She said there was no testing to see if it was even blood and no DNA testing to see whose blood it was, if in fact it was blood. She can't say if it was one person or multiple contributors because that was not tested. Trooper Proctor was there while she was working in the Sallyport. When she was finished, she gave the red solo cups to a Canton police officer who gave it to her initially. She doesn't know if Trooper Proctor later took control of those. Back to the taillight swabs. She said she recently watched the video last Thursday and saw the officer who was helping her in that taillight area was wearing gloves. She collected the swab from an exposed area of the taillight when it was intact. She swabbed an upper right piece of taillight, the lower piece of red taillight, as well as the clear portion. She did not swab any other areas like the internal areas, only external. The defense says you aren't able to say where any DNA may have come from. The witness said it would have come from the external exposed area of the taillight. She only did one swab for those three areas, and the defense points out if there had been DNA present, she would not have been able to say where it came from. The witness agrees. Did you see any glass in the taillight that is part of the taillight? The witness says she cannot distinguish what's glass and what's not. The defense says you say you recovered apparent glass from the rear bumper, but you can't be sure it's glass, and the witness says that's correct. The defense puts up a photo of stickers showing on the car where the glass was found. And the defense asks if that's a reflection and actually only one sticker, making it look like there's twice as much glass than there actually is. And then he points out in the photo, there is a letter B that's backwards and asks if, because of the reflection and the reversed letter B, does that indicate there's actually only one sticker and one volume of glass associated with that bumper? The witness can't say just by looking at the photo, so they really kind of zoom in good. But what she can say is all items of apparent glass were collected together, but she can't say if she labeled these areas separately to show the pieces better, or if this is a reflection and it's only one area where the apparent glass was seen. She admits it is a possible reflection in only one area. The defense says it's important to have an accurate answer to that question, and the witness says yes, but it wouldn't have changed what she collected and how she would have labeled it. The defense asked if that glass was embedded, and the witness said no, it was just resting on the bumper. The defense shows a photo of the SUV in the Sally Port and points out that there is snow on the car. She did not see any when she was there. They play the video and you see snow start to fall off the back of the car, and then what's above that initial piece that falls, the top starts sliding off onto the ground, and the defense asks, does that hit the bumper before it hits the floor? She can't tell from the video. The defense says this video is from January 29th. You come in February 1st, and there's glass on the bumper as you described as perched. Yes. He asked, how far is Dighton from Canton? The witness said, at least 30 to 45 minutes if you go the speed limit. The defense points out that this SUV was towed from Dighton and brought to the Sally Port before the witness's examination. And you were told the alleged incident took place in Canton. So you are looking at this vehicle and you knew the car went from Canton to Dighton, then Dighton back to Canton? Yes. Defense, the glass pieces perched on the bumper would have traveled 60 miles before you saw them, and then asks if she knows about the weather conditions on January 29th, which she did. He asks if she knew the wind speed, and he pulls up an exhibit. At the time the car was seized, it shows that the winds were peaking at 37 miles an hour on the 29th. The defense asks if it's possible glass would rest on a bumper after traveling that far in strong winds. She doesn't know. She did say she retrieved the suspected glass with tweezers and it was easy to do. Defense, you also located a hair on the rear right corner panel, and it wasn't sitting on the horizontal bumper. It was on a vertical portion of the panel, a smooth surface, and the hair was not secured to the panel, was it? No. Defense, you found this single apparent hair at the time you found the glass pieces on the bumper. The witness said it was in the same general time frame. The defense asked how long she was there. She said about 2 hours. Defense, do you know if that hair was part of the journey from Canton to Dighton and then Dighton to Canton? She doesn't know. She doesn't know when the hair was put on the vehicle, and again says it was easy to remove with tweezers and there was no resistance. The last bit of testimony was the defense pointing out the hair looks different in the two separate photos. The witness thinks it's the angle in which the photograph was taken. The defense asks if it's possible that the hair was moved when someone took the photo. The witness said she did not take the photo and she can't tell because, again, it's two different angles. That was the end of testimony today. She will be back on the stand on cross examination in the morning. We'll be live streaming starting at 9 Eastern. So come join us. Hope you guys have a good rest of your evening. We will see you soon.